Tonight on Currents News, are you ready for Phase 2 reopening? Governor Cuomo says it's coming to New York City Monday, but some store owners are not happy.
Small businesses are angry and scared as details of the reopening remain confusing in New York City. I'm Emily Druby, and that's ahead.
Alarming new reports that COVID infections are breaking records in several U.S. states. And a resurgence in Beijing. They're shutting down schools again. What does that mean for America's future? Virus testing is coming to hard-hit communities in the Big Apple thanks to a group that's been praised by the Pope. Plus, a bishop and the author of a children's book, Bishop Shelton Fabre, is here. He wrote it to help kids cope with racism. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. The long-awaited second phase of reopening New York City should happen Monday. Governor Andrew Cuomo is saying the Big Apple is on track to meet that date and more places could get back to work. But for many small business owners, there's still a lot of confusion and anger. Currents News' Emily Druby has the story from Bay Ridge.
The coronavirus has taken so much from home co-owner Salvatore Forte.
It broke me. It really broke me.
First, he had to temporarily close his Bay Ridge, Brooklyn business, a combination restaurant and retail store. Then both his mother and father died from the virus.
I haven't had a funeral for my parents. I haven't seen my family to this day.
Putting his parents to rest is not his only concern. He's also worried for the future of his business. And like many, he's confused by the reopening plan.
We're doing what we're told, but we're getting mixed messages, and it's so uncertain.
On Wednesday, Governor Andrew Cuomo announced the city is on track to hit Phase 2 on Monday.
You look at all the numbers are good.
Referring to positive tests, hospitalizations, and death rates, Mayor Bill de Blasio was more vague.
It's a day-to-day discussion.
He said while the numbers are good, they could see a spike this weekend from Phase 1 reopenings and the racial justice protests. Back in Bay Ridge, the unknown is leaving small business owners frustrated at a time when they're already struggling to get by.
You know, we do have to pay our bills, and it's not easy. So, you know, we just want to progress and we just want to move on. You know, we just want to get to the next phase and then eventually get to the phase after it.
Lisa DeLuca co-owns retail store Charmed by JLM. They've managed to stay afloat with online orders, but did take an extra financial hit when their store was robbed back in April. But it goes further than not having concrete dates for the reopenings. Many restaurants in the heart of Bay Ridge say they can't survive on outdoor seating alone.
What are you going to do if it rains? You can't bring the people inside.
Anthony Marcillo owns a beloved local restaurant, Gino's. He says with the restrictions, the most he can fit outside is 10 tables. The restaurant normally seats 175.
This is a tough time, and a lot of small businesses are not going to make it through it.
He and many Bay Ridge business owners are saying concessions from the government, like tax breaks, limited indoor seating, and the start of Phase 3 could make a huge difference.
We need to allow the businesses to just open and be responsible, and I think we can trust them to do that. And I don't know why the mayor is holding back so much, particularly when we're seeing such a double standard in this city.
The double standard being protest and recent crowds forming on New York City streets, all while business owners continue to suffer. In Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Emily Druby, Currents News.
Hard-hit neighborhoods in the city are getting new help in fighting the coronavirus. Free virus testing sites are being set up by Somos Community Care, a New York network of more than 2,500 medical providers. The tests will be offered in Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Upper Manhattan. Not long ago, Pope Francis met with the leaders of Somos and praised their work. Information about the tests is available at somoscommunitycare.org. Governor Cuomo says New York tested more than 59,000 people for COVID yesterday, and only 567 tests came back positive, which he says is a record low. That's not the case in other areas around the country. 21 states are reporting an increase in new COVID-19 cases over the past week. Texas, Arizona, and Florida setting records for most cases in a single day. Even so, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis is continuing to reopen the Sunshine State.
We're not shutting down we're going to go forward. You have to have society function.
Florida will now host the Republican National Convention and could be the temporary home of the NBA and WNBA. But as crowds return to public spaces like restaurants and malls, a warning from one woman who says she's one of 16 friends who tested positive after visiting a recently reopened bar in Jacksonville.
At the time, it was more out of sight, out of mind. We hadn't known anybody who had it personally. Governor, mayor, everybody says it's fine. We go out. It's a friend's birthday. It was a mistake.
At least 21 states are seeing an uptick in daily new coronavirus cases over the past week. This as Vice President Mike Pence made stops in Iowa without wearing a mask. The leader of the coronavirus task force downplaying the severity of the disease as President Trump encourages states to ramp up their economies more quickly. Pence writing in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, the media has tried to scare the American people every step of the way, and these grim predictions of a second wave are no different. We've slowed the spread. We've cared for the most vulnerable. We've saved lives. That's a cause for celebration.
The problem is the pandemic is not done with us. Unfortunately, it's still in the early days. If we do not want to end up with hundreds of thousands of deaths across the country by the time this whole thing is over, we've got to change course and really move towards suppressing this virus.
According to Harvard researchers, the United States needs to do at least 20 million tests per day to safely reopen by late July. The current rate is roughly 500,000 tests daily. The United States has looked to virus developments in China as a leading indicator of what could happen here a few months later. And things aren't going well there right now. The situation in the capital, Beijing, is being called very dire by Chinese officials tonight. More than 100 infections linked to a giant food market are forcing a strict lockdown of many neighborhoods. Schools in the city of more than 20 million people are now closed, and all travel out of Beijing is being strongly discouraged. Breaking news about the Atlanta killing of Rayshard Brooks. An ex-cop is being accused of his murder. Garrett Rolfe is facing 11 charges. Prosecutors are saying he shot Brooks twice in the back and then kicked him as he was lying on the ground Friday night after Brooks fell asleep in his car. The incident between white cops and a black man has sparked protests around the country. Senate Republicans today are unveiling their plan to reform law enforcement practices, while House Democrats are getting ready to vote on a sweeping police overhaul next week. There are key differences between the two that could block a final agreement. Nadia Romero has the story from the White House.
The urgency to address police brutality and racial injustice being felt on Capitol Hill.
Too often we're having a discussion in this nation about, are you supporting the law enforcement community or are you supporting communities of color? This is a false binary choice.
Senate Republicans introducing police reform legislation that gives grants to police agencies for body cameras, requires departments to report all officer-involved incidents that cause serious bodily injury or death to the FBI, and uses federal funding to discourage but not ban no-knock warrants or chokeholds.
To the young person who's concerned when he's stopped by the law enforcement officers, we see you.
The proposal also makes lynching a federal hate crime. But while Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell pledges to fast-track the legislation, Senate Democrats say
this bill will need dramatic improvement.
The clash in the chamber, echoing a fight felt in the House.
Can anyone on the Republican side say unequivocally Black Lives Matter?
Unequivocally, all lives matter.
Where Democrats work on their own proposal that mandates body cameras, bans chokeholds, and makes it easier for people to sue the police.
A glaring contrast between a strong, comprehensive Democratic bill in the House and a much narrower and much less effective Republican bill in the Senate.
But in order for Congress to act, one plan needs bipartisan support and the president's signature to become law. At the White House, I'm Nadia Romero.
New York's police commissioner Dermot Shea is saying the long-lasting police reform must take root inside the NYPD.
I think the key point here, though, is when you have people holding press conferences and announcing reform, I think it's well-intentioned. I don't think it's the way true reform has to come, though. It can be a part of it. I think true reform, comes from internal. And if you have laws imposed, but you have resistance internal, I don't think it's where we want to be. I could speak for the police department now here. We have been reforming for the last 6 years.
Shea said his decision this week to get rid of the plainclothes anti-crime unit will build trust in the community and protect cops. This Friday's Juneteenth, marking the end of slavery in the U.S., will be a holiday for New York State employees. Governor Cuomo making it official today by executive order. He's saying Juneteenth is a time for reflection, and he wants it to be a holiday for all New Yorkers starting next year. He's going to introduce legislation for that purpose. 5 years ago, a white supremacist massacred 9 African-American parishioners inside a South Carolina church. The Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston was holding Bible study when Dylan Roof stormed in. He fired 70 rounds aiming at his victims because they were black. He later told cops he wanted to start a race war. Roof was given 9 life sentences in state prison. And please join us for a Currents News special program, Faith and America's Original Sin. An encore showing of the half-hour broadcast about racism and why many in the church call it America's Original Sin will air tonight right after this newscast. And you can also see it on Tuesday, June 23rd at 7:30 p.m. There's a lot more news headed your way. Talking to your kids about racism. Many children have questions these days, and Bishop Shelton Fabre has answers. He has some advice for you coming up. And we're not all created equal when it comes to the internet. We'll tell you how the Diocese of Brooklyn is trying to change that. Stay with us.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
Many children have questions about the recent police-involved deaths of 2 black men and the protest that followed. But how do you explain what happened to your kids if you're having a hard time processing it yourself? Bishop Shelton Fabre of the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux in Louisiana oversaw the production of a children's book on the topic called Everyone Belongs. And he's here tonight with advice on how to talk to your kids about racism. So first of all, Bishop, how important is it to talk about racism with your kids?
I think, as you said, kids are seeing and they're hearing a lot, and trying to process that and trying to understand it. It is very, very important because I think it's a catechetical moment. And the catechesis that is conveyed is, that each and every person is made in the image and likeness of God. And so this is a catechetical moment for children, and it's a catechetical moment that is in response to those things that they are seeing or those things that they are hearing. So it is very important that parents talk to their children, because if they don't, they're going to leave their children to come to understand these things from other voices that may not be the best perspective on the issues, and lead the children in a way that God would not want us to go. So I think this is a catechetical moment, and I do think that parents, as the primary educators of their children, can seize this moment to teach their children important life lessons.
Now, does the age and race of the child play a role in how you approach the subject?
Yes. Racism is a very, very sensitive subject, and as with any sensitive subject, you need to be age appropriate. You need to remember that there are certain things at this age that this child can and cannot yet comprehend. So that figures into, what you share with your children. And certainly as you look at the race of children, particularly, as they get older, they're going to experience racism differently. African American children will experience racism one way, and then speaking with Hispanic and Asian kids the same way, and naturally Caucasian or white kids, you have to discuss racism with them from a different perspective. So the age and the race of the child does figure into what you share with them about racism.
And can we honestly convey the brutality of racism in America to our kids without depriving them of any sense of love and respect for their country?
I think so. I think, any discussion on racism with children must begin with as Open Wide Our Heart says, any racism that is in their heart, how they themselves might be giving in to the sin of racism. So it begins on a personal level. And then as the child progresses to that point where the child is able to understand that you can love something even though it might have its flaws. You know, we all know that about family life. We love our families, but none of them are perfect. As the child gets to that point where they can understand that you can love something though it is flawed, and you might be able to help the person or help our country overcome that flaw, that is the point at which you start talking with them about systemic racism. So I think that there is a progression. You begin with children, helping them to understand personal racism, and then you progress to that point where you can help them to understand systemic racism.
Okay, and how can parents get a copy of the children's book, Everyone Belongs?
The children's book is published and printed by Loyola Press. Simply go to their website and they will be able to get a copy of the book by following the instructions on their website.
Okay, sounds good. Bishop Shelton Fabre from Louisiana, thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you very much.
And once again, you can get Bishop Fabre's book, Everyone Belongs, online at the Loyola bookstore. Go to store.loyolapress.com/everyone-belongs. New York City's public school kids are facing uncertainty about the next academic year. The school's chancellor, Richard Carranza, is hoping students are back in classrooms come September, but Mayor Bill de Blasio is cautioning that might not happen. If remote learning does continue, do the students have what they need? There are published reports that in some public schools, only about 2/3 of students can get online. Getting online is how kids learn, people work, and connections with loved ones are made. Since there are many families without solid internet access, the Diocese of Brooklyn is stepping up to make a difference. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story.
More than a quarter of New York City's 8 million residents are not connected to the internet. That's according to data from the mayor's office. And only a few weeks ago, Aiden and Alyssa Osorio were part of that population.
It's been okay, but it's also been tough.
The siblings were using devices that didn't have the bandwidth to connect them to their classes at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in South Ozone Park. They were missing school.
I was worried about how we were going to be able to spend a little bit extra on iPads if needed. So I felt like our prayers were answered when I received that email from the teachers.
Jessica Medina, Aiden and Alyssa's mom, said a weight was lifted when she got that email offering her kids iPads. Aiden and Alyssa's iPads come from a device grant through DeSales Media, NetTV's parent company. They even come with internet access, free of charge.
We don't want any child to be left behind because they don't have a device.
Gina Kreinchich is the Director of Educational Media Services for DeSales Media Group. Over the last 3 years, the device grant has allowed her to give out more than 10,000 iPads and tablets.
Even if they do have internet and a computer, we're finding that there still is difficulty for everyone to get on and do what they need to do during this crisis.
The latest data from the city comptroller's office shows low-income families struggle disproportionately with lack of internet access, a problem that existed since the debut of the World Wide Web and exacerbated by the pandemic. 504,000 households across New York City have no internet subscription, and more than 1/3 of families making less than $20,000 a year have no access to internet at all. The latest data from the mayor's office shows the number of people in New York City without a broadband connection at home is equivalent to the population of Houston. We reached out to the Department of Education about its plan to close the gap in internet access, but our request was not answered, leaving many worried what will happen come September.
Would it be kinetic or potential?
But that worry is behind those in Catholic schools throughout Brooklyn and Queens. DeSales set out on a mission to give every single student in need an iPad to learn with, a mission they're close to accomplishing.
If they don't have the device in their hand, they're missing that connection.
With devices in hand, the Osorio family is keeping that connection with their school community and their faith.
In Jesus' name we pray.
Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The COVID pandemic forced the postponement of this year's Chrism Mass. It's now set for this Friday. The Mass is when Bishop DiMarzio blesses the holy oils that will be used in the sacraments throughout the diocese all year. You'll be able to watch the Chrism Mass live right here on Net TV. It airs Friday, June 19th, beginning at 7:30 p.m., right after Currents News. And still to come on Currents News, a miraculous recovery after a woman undergoes an operation. Her family says it took 2 miracles to keep her alive. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Finally tonight, God answered a North Carolina family's prayers twice. Coronavirus patient Myra Ramirez's doctors didn't have much hope she'd be able to beat the disease. Then the miracles started, and tonight Myra is recovering after undergoing surgery that's thought to be the first of its kind. Monique Robinson has the story from Wilmington, North Carolina.
She put her faith in God and waited for good news.
On June 3rd, they told us that we wanted to see her for the last time for us to rush and get there because they didn't think she was going to make it past the day.
Kate Ramirez remembers rushing to find a flight from North Carolina to Chicago as doctors warned coronavirus was killing her sister, Myra, who spent 6 weeks on a ventilator and life support machine. The day before, doctors tried to clear her airways and
they ended up hitting her kidney. So her kidney was bleeding out.
That morning, everything was fine, but Kate says by the afternoon, doctors said Myra was still bleeding, so the family caught a flight and prayed. Kate says only Myra's mother and boyfriend were allowed in the hospital for last goodbyes.
So when they both arrived to the hospital, the nurses quickly talked to them and told them that she wasn't at end of life anymore, that they don't know how or what happened. That a miracle happened and they were able to stabilize her.
But her lungs were severely damaged. Kate says doctors told the family a double lung transplant was her only chance of survival, and then another miracle. Kate says that night a donor was found, and on June 5th, Myra went through a 10-hour double transplant lung surgery at Northwestern Medicine in Chicago, becoming the first no lung transplant in the U.S. for COVID-19. Kate says with God, anything is possible.
I got to see her yesterday. I was with her all day. She gets so happy. She just had a big smile.
That was Monique Robinson reporting. Doctors say Myra still has a long road ahead, but they hope she will eventually make a full recovery. And that is Currents News. Please stay right here on Net TV. Coming up next, Faith and America's Original Sin, the half-hour broadcast about racism and why many in the church call it America's original sin. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.